for illumined life to be birthed into form. I am the truth. I am the light. Illumined, beloved divine. So hello there everyone, and welcome to this video update with me here today. I will actually record two video updates in two parts, two different segments. The first one will be about my current path as the embodiment of Aurea and my challenges throughout these last 2 years, especially in the last 2 months. There has been quite a culmination happening in my life and our lives. And so it's been a while since I showed up my face and spoke to you about these current events and unfolding. And it wasn't because I was absent on a break, on a retreat, having my holiday. It was because I was having a very difficult, very hard time. It's been so much work of pushing through the dark, pushing the illumined light through the dark. So this is something that I want to dedicate this first video to. And in the next segment, we will go deeper into the 8-8 gateway and what does it mean, this current timeline shift that we're entering into. And I will go deeper into the more expanded perspective. But the reason why I want to share this first is because, every year for me, August has a tremendous influence in my life. It's almost like the month of August, for those of you who know me and those of you who don't, August is actually my favorite month of the year. And it's usually in August that I have major breakthroughs and I have specific establishments in my life. For example, I started Ascension Pioneers in 2011 in August. It was exactly August 18th, I remember. And in 2013, on August 17th, we moved to this last space where we actually stayed and had our home residence. This is also something that I will be mentioning today. But because the video content will be very difficult, at least from my personal side of the story, because I want to be transparent in all the obstacles and challenges that I had to go through, because the way I live and experience Aurea is not like most people who have actually encountered her through me as an illumined light being and her experiences and how they were. In my example, as her human embodiment, her human extension, it's actually quite the opposite. But because it will be more difficult, more challenging, this video, and in the end, it might get quite progressive in the way that, I will share about what we recently experienced. It's really not easy what we had to go through. Not just myself, but my mother as well, because she's directly linked with me and because she's one of the souls who is Aurea's extension as well. And I came here, she came here through me as her human embodiment to bring her up. And she's one of the few who's actually ascending in this lifetime. Recently, besides everything that I've experienced, I actually suffered through the most painful, what my family galactic guides called the birthing process. It happened through the time of my period, but these are very specifically non-period related events that our body discharges of darkness that has been incepted into this body through the transgression acts and deeds, as you well know, those of you who've been following me for such a long time, and what these transgression deeds are capable in creating and performing in the human body, especially the lumen body seeds, because these bodies, our bodies, are even more extremely sensitive than the majority of human bodies. In case you haven't noticed, there is this tendency for the humans who've been living in the darkness for a very long time, for them to actually get very well adjusted in sitting in darkness. I have one example in my family, and the person is been drinking and smoking and ruining their body. They have everything in their body that's gone wrong, but they did this to themselves and still they're alive, and if a light being did that to their body, they probably wouldn't survive that way. It's almost like the darkness is keeping these bodies in a very lower, denser state so they can more easily sustain, in their bodies and withstand these very dense conditions. As a light being, this is not possible. So the more that I was actually embodying Aurea in my life, the less I was capable of dealing with these physical challenges of the earthly 3D matrix tendencies that is almost like gaining its grip further and further, digging this divine claw, of darkness and into the soil of the earth at the 3D matrix level, of course. So in the next video segment, which will be part 2, we will go deeper into the extension of the split, which is a continuation of the video that I last recorded. But in today's video, I want to start with how Aurea has been moving through me, right? So in this last birthing experience, it was the most profound pain that I've experienced. I had two, actually three. One was a few years ago in the summer when I was collapsing. We stayed, we were actually by the Chalk Lake and we stayed there, and I had such tremendous pain all of a sudden coming through my period that I was collapsing there in the floor, trying to get to the way to my car. I collapsed several times, and then the moment I got there, I had to go in the forest and, just do my thing. It was that bad. And I thought I won't be able to survive because it's almost like I was losing so much of my power. And back then I didn't know what this was actually, what was happening to my body. The next one like this was actually in December 2019 when I discovered the transgression phenomena and what it has performed and done in my body. It was the next one. And for the whole week, I had tremendous cramps. And these cramps are not like the usual menstrual cramps that women can experience. I've had this, woman's body for so many years, and this has not been the tendency. So when this last discharge came, which was, I believe it was sometime last week, in the beginning of the last week, but I'm not really sure. I think it was on Sunday. And the pain was so insurmountable that again, I believe I can't hold it. And as I've explained to you, how you know that it's not a transgression-based pain, it's not a physical-based pain, is when you take a pill and the pill doesn't work. That's the only indicator so far that I've discovered that really can show and pinpoint, where the transgression workings is happening, because it's a deeper rooted pain. It's not performed at the physical level in which the body's nervous system receptors are receiving and emitting signals for what we then, we call the translation of these signals in the brain that, signals to the body that there's somehow a distortion in the body present. There's such a highly discharged energy that has been seeded into the body that when the body is dismantling that, the body goes through tremendous pain. So just about that happened, and I barely survived again. This was almost like the third one of this kind, of this nature for me. And this is so painful that when you have these pains, these painful cramps, they're anything unlike any normal menstrual cramps for a woman, at least from what I can tell in my experience being a woman for so many years. I'm not as young anymore. It's just so profoundly painful that there's something in the works, and nothing works. It's just prayer and breathing and divine assistance. And the moment we started doing these charges through the body, we've gotten guidance that, again, this is a tremendous release, that the body simply dismantles this inception that was placed at the bottom of the seed, which, of course, as we know, I've talked about this for those of you who've been with me, the seed of Illumined Union is placed in the womb. And because the feminine seed, or the feminine Christ seed, is the most important one, as this will progress in Illumined Union within the human's body, and how the galactic and the human, or the light being in the human, incarnate, right? We talked about it as the star seed and the earth seed will merge and become one. There was an interruption there. There was this intervention that was negative, it was regressive, and this is what transgression work has been doing, besides all the electrifying phenomena and being electrocuted for so many years. And so this was the last of such nature, and I believe, again, I wouldn't survive if it wasn't for my mother. And these transgression dispensations, these releases through the body, are so difficult because you never know when it's your last one, because every time this is so enormously so, you believe, well, this is my last one because it was so huge, there's probably nothing following that, because it cannot get worse than that. But in my experience, the body doesn't know. I didn't know that would happen. It just came out of the blue. It surprised me. We barely survived. It was such a heavy labor. It was actually a labor of love. My mother was there with me the whole time. Sorry about that. You know, again, the sun is doing a little bit of the messing around. And so it's been so difficult because she, at that point, again, she worries about me, and it's difficult for her to watch me suffer so deeply. And she's just with me, holding her hand, and going into her fervent prayer mode. And at the last resort, when I was given the direction that the cramps will lessen, they will be loosened up a bit. We just did the breathing, and it's almost like nothing can stop that pain, because the pain in itself was seated in the body, and as it's exiting the body, it hurts, and it hurts like hell. And you can imagine me being in this kind of pain for over 2 years now, and the body is exhausted and extremely deprived of everything that any normal human body experiences through nurture and cultivation, right? So when this was about over, we went into another prayer and invocation and getting some answers. And I had some very specific questions to ask, because this was something that I just needed to understand for myself. And going through the reflection journey of this whole last 2 years of transgression and what this was all for, because when I was in the deepest pain, I actually felt myself being as purely Aurea. And I held my mother, and I was holding her. And in that moment, I say to her, do you know that you're, well, probably one of just a few children that has chosen to be moved up and ascended at this specific cycle? So many. And she was like saying through me, and I was crying like deeply, like I felt her sadness, I felt her grieving, like losing so many of her children. And that means, because we have spirit beings have many, many light extensions of themselves that we call, like these spirit extensions becoming different soul aspects, or, not going to say fragments, but extensions, right? And she was saying something like, so many lost. And I was holding my mother and saying to her, you're my only truly faithful one. You're the one that truly made it. You're really the one. I'm so lucky. But at the same time, so many have not chosen it. So many have fallen through and into the darkness. And I felt her grieving. And through that pain, it was so difficult for me to experience that as the human body. So many questions arose again, right? So we went into this deep contemplation mode, and we've gotten actually these answers, right, about the transgression journey, that it wasn't actually planned, because even spirit beings who are, we use these bodies, the bodies are used through light beings as illumined avatar bodies, but these are regular human bodies. They're just becoming more and more illumined when the more of the light of the illumined being that's behind this body goes into the body itself, right? um, and so the body progresses through the years, but it's still working within the soil of the earth, which means you get a human body, and there's a light being, an illumined light being behind it, and it goes more and more and deeper into the body itself. So as this was happening for me, as I explained it to you, at a specific point when there was too much of my luminosity going into my body, I experienced transgression. There was this, what my life family called transgression against the very nature of illumined life, right? I became dangerous to the system or the status quo or the matrix, and the desire of the darkness to pull as many souls through the dark vortex, which I talk about as becoming the next black hole, right? So we're going to talk about this further in the second update, which will be the 8A gateway update. But let me continue with Aurea's journey, right, and through my experience. And so as I was asking, the guidance came directly through God, him, her, self, itself, right? Just a beautiful emanation of life. Our creatorship source is life itself. And God said that basically it wasn't chosen, it wasn't pre-planned that this transgression would happen. And in truth, actually, if my human self, if the body that received Aurea, or this illumined light being that Aurea is, that it wouldn't choose that. Like no one in its normal sanity would choose so much pain and suffering. But because it happened anyway, and because no one can know what I've experienced as illumined light being in the body, because they've tried to not just distort my body, but they tried to kill it off many, many times. It's like this war in spirit is actually happening. It's ongoing through the earthly realms, because these darker regressive types that are also these, they're also light beings in a way, but they don't function anymore through what we call the divine trinity of life. They're not tantrikas. They're polarized beings, and they function through extreme polarity, extreme duality, separation, and darkness. and they're creating black holes instead of white holes, right? And not many of you know this, but I've explained this to a few people, I believe, in my Patreon group a while ago. That in this winter, when I went through the darkest winter of my life, when I actually felt the calling of Aurea, then she wants to resurrect again through me. But at that time, I was so down and so low that I couldn't believe that was ever, a possibility, that it could be possible, that it could be myself again in a healthy human body. I still don't have a vital, healthy body, not yet, because so much attack has been happening for me. Because I was already in a more vulnerable state due to this transgression. Before, this was impossible because I was at the top of my game. But I didn't yet know what transgression was. And because of the consequences that the transgression kind of led me into, I actually became stronger. So, in a way, God knew. It wasn't chosen by me, in a way, as a being, but God, as this immense, uh, divine intelligence, can foresee everything and anything. And that's why we always say the last word belongs to God, or the last choice is always the divine will. So in a way, it was calculated that any other choice can lead, and as a stimulation, it can lead to something totally different, as the way your life as a human can have its turn of events, right? A total turnover in one example, right? But in a way, God foresees, and that's why any solution can be calculated into the divine prism or divine creatrix of life. And it's a divine creation. It's not the same as the matrix, which we know, it calculates things in a very, very falsified, polarity based way. It no longer functions the sacred geometry and the fractal nature of life, but it's very much the equation that I saw this winter, that was actually calculated into my body, which is finite equation, which is why life always needs to be swallowed up from the outside, which is why the darkness needs light and attacks light and takes life force from the light, because in itself it cannot produce life anymore, because it doesn't operate from divine trinity. And we've talked about this many, many times before, right? So I'm going to get to the point, but today's point is that I just sit with you and I share the difficulties of my body, my human self, having to go through the birthing pain of Aurea and everything she sacrificed to birth this divine child. Because she didn't come here for herself. She came here to pull many, many souls who were her extensions, who were of the family of light, who were of this divine heritage, this divine descent, but somehow have forgotten. They became burdened souls. They became too entrenched in physical matrix. And hence it was agreed that I, as this human body, was chosen for this purpose. And that specific DNA and family lineage was created for that, especially because my mother was already at the spirit level, her offspring. But here right? Isn't that fantastic how God calculates things? I became her offspring and I became her human child. But in a way, she's my spirit child, right? It's very, very reversed and strange, but sometimes things as they are spirit, they're opposite as they are in earth, and vice versa. It's not always as above, so below. And you have to know other extensions of divine laws to understand these things. Because if you only learn to quote the regular things that are shown to you through the New Age, you're not going to have the understanding of creation. You're going to just become a repetition, right? Like a tape inserted into the recorder. And you're just going to repeat things that are shown to you or dressed to you or into this world, like you're going to have a very limited perspective about things because they're not coming through you and the spirit of life itself. So to be Aurea and to experience the difficulties that she had to go through her body avatar, which is me, it's been very difficult, right? So when this data, this information came that it wasn't chosen, but somehow we had to work around it. And as I've explained to you, and it was in my solstice video this June, it was about fighting for union, and I've shared this writing that I've shared from my human self, this human in despair, and how much was taken from me as a human divine child, how my inner child is so wounded because of the path of the spirit of the mission this had to be, and everything that I had to sacrifice and toil for this labor of love that these illumined beings have. And when these mission teams come to me as Aurea, they always call me Queenie. They say this Queenie. I'm like, why are they calling me like that? And they would never give me guidance because they always tell me, but it's all in you. We can't give it to you because it's just too sacred. You're like beyond us giving you anything. So they just come to me to heal me, to create an environment of safety within my body, so these distortions created through transgression can be more easily healed, and so on and such. And these assistants are an amazing team of illumined light beings as well, but they're different type of beings. They are almost like what I call light surgeons, and they are of the Arcturian descent. These are amazingly powerful beings that have so much skill and precision, right? These beings are, they're amazing. And I'm just proud to call them my team, because in the human body, I need this team, not just in spirit. I told you before many times that if I didn't have this team, and if it wasn't, for example, for my mother who had this fervent prayer for me throughout these attacks and transgression, attacks, basically experiments with my body, not just on my body, but with my body, right? Claiming it. Without these aspects, I really would not be or stay alive. So it was difficult to stay alive, and then even more difficult to resurrect. And this is where I am now, still trying to resurrect Aurea. And today I'm actually talking about her crucifixion, everything she went through, and I will also share last bits of her journey so far in these last few weeks and months, for you to get a better idea, everything that's been, not just, because when I tell you the suffering, that's one thing, but when I tell you actual examples, it's a whole other story, because everything in my life so far has not been about having a leisure-filled life of enjoyment and pleasure of the earthly sensual nature of life, that's earthly human living, in a higher density, but it's been anything but. It's been moving the light through the darkness. And because of that, everything in my personal life as a human counterpart has been sacrificed for that part of the mission. And so when this birthing process was complete, we actually had this mini ceremony, and we created another coffee cup reading. And what was in it, it just really astounded me, because there was the image of a feline being with a crown on top of her head. It was about queen, being the queen, because feline beings, Aurea, in a way, her aspect is also feline, and feline aspect is the creatrix aspect of each being, because the primordial creator beings are all feline. They were of the feline light being family origin descent, right? And so there was this lioness head with a crown and cheering beings there, and I think there was this man that was performing this kind of ritual. And it's almost like, when you're giving birth, they have this terminology, and they're saying it's crowning, right? Like the head of the baby. But they were saying these same things to me, like it's crowning. Like, what? Oh yeah, I understand. And they were telling me that this process is actually, as difficult as it is right now, it is just before becoming not just queen, a spirit, a being that is so full of love. And I'll tell you something I wanted to finish earlier, but somehow I intervened and interrupted myself, because I always, split many ways, because so much to say, because it's all piling up. Me being absent for so many weeks, and I'm trying to get it all in order, but then I'm just rambling around. So it was just this becoming this in a human form as well. It was really beautiful, but it can't always see it as a human. Sometimes I'm like, yeah, nah, probably just something I'm making up or just imagining, but it's really happening, right? And as I was going through this, something wondrous happened. But before I tell you this, and it was actually an experience of someone in my group who actually had an Illumined awakening. And this, I will tell you the truth, it doesn't happen every day. This is so rare. I know a lot of you think, well, people in my group, they're straightforward going to that path. Not at all. There's people who are just curious. There's people who just stay, come and go for 1 month, or just people who are tuning in, tuning out. But there's so few people who are actually devoted. And within those few devoted people who really want to not just understand now, but want to understand each time, expand deeper their understanding of what illumination is, and walk this path and go down this road, there's only a tiny percentage of those that actually unlock, or somehow through their own love and the willingness of that intent, open the gate to illumination. So that was a beautiful thing. But before I share this, I want to tell you a little preview of why this is so important, as to why I'm suffering so much, because of the nature of who Aurea is and what Aurea does and her power. This winter, right, when I was living in the dark basement full of mold and disgusting things, and grasping for air, and having these transgression releases that came out of these bursts, they were cyclical. I told you about the spinning wheel. This was so dark. When I encountered this energy, I cannot tell you how dark it is. It's just up there in front of your face. And when you meet the matrix itself, it's like anything but life. When you know the prism of life and the beauty of life, and when you see the opposite, like face to face, confronted with it, And then you understand why your body has been so damaged, right? Hair loss here, everywhere, here split, right? I still, on my bad days, I still feel electricity here, buzzing and pain in the ribs, and here, like when the shooting arrow went here, it's all because of these attacks. And as I was shown, all the three portals that illumined light beings use to embody within the human bodies, which is the crown, the heart, and the root, they were all attacked in my example. So when I had tremendous purging and the pain coming through, was all these areas, right? The head, I told you, this transgression pain here in the skull, and the teeth, right? And then here, right, the heart was attacked, and then at the bottom, right, the womb. All these. So when I was in that dark basement processing all those things, and remember back then in the winter of this year 2020, or was it in December? I don't remember, but I think it was this year already in 2021. I actually shared all that knowledge of transgression, how it works with you, and that's out there as a free course. You can just find it here on YouTube, as you know. And as I was going through these motions, I thought each time I felt this primordial fear that doesn't even originate from yourself. It's just there, and it's an inception. And you can see how fear is really an inception. It's not a self-created human thing. We talk about fear as humans experiencing fear. You don't know fear that you believe it's like fear, before you're nervous. Like you're nervous before a new experience, or going out of your comfort zone, or passing a test, things like that. You don't know fear, like the fear that I've experienced through those unfolding. These things happen through the night. At nighttime, I kept waking up, and at that time, me and my mother actually we had to sleep in the same bed, because we ended up, remember, being homeless, ended up in this apartment of our own buyer, who stayed in our apartment for free. That's a very, very long story, which some of you know, some of you don't. But it was so terrible that we actually slept in the same bed. And then I finally figured out why it had to be so. Because if I did not have my mother sleeping next to me and her energy in that bed, I wouldn't survive. Because that was the hardest part, was not just being transgressed and being put these electroshocks in my body, but it was actually unveiling them and unleashing them from my body. This was the most painful part, because when they do that, you're numbed and you can't feel. That's why most people are not aware they have transgression in their body. And it's not performed on them to the extent that I had to experience as Aurea's child, because I'm the interesting one. I'm the seed of Illumined Union. I came here with this purpose. I'm her Illumined body avatar, so I was the most attacked person on the planet. That's what they told me. You were the most attacked person on the planet. No one goes through what you did. And I know people experience transgression on many levels, and not all of it is transgression. Some of it is self-created karmic debris in your body that you're, unleashing when you're ascending gradually, step by step, through the ladder of spirit. But what happened, I understood finally why this is so, and why I had to sleep next to her that whole winter, because without her, I would not have survived. And she was in panic mode, because each night I was waking up saying, "Oh, I'm dying, I'm dying." I was grasping for air, feeling this pain everywhere, seeing the spinning wheel, the matrix, and feeling this immense fear. And it was just terrible. I would not want that experience in anyone, because it's worse than physical pain. It's like the worst case of anxiety you can feel. And I don't know even how anxiety feels, because I was never an anxious person. I told you, as Aurea's child, I was always happy and giddy and playful and willing to entertain others, and willing to sacrifice my love and devotion for others. And that's just how I am, because I'm Aurea. I'm her child in the physical human flesh form. And all this that I felt how it is at the deepest ceiling of the dark, and how the darkness works through the matrix and what it emanates out, and was like meeting it in the face. And even though I wasn't chosen, God knew, at the highest leverage point of its own divine plan, what it was doing. And why it is chosen is one of the most favored children, which is Aurea. And I'll tell you this why. Because after a lot of that release that winter, I actually received guidance. One day I was doing the pulsar. I was just trying to resurrect it yet again, and I received this guidance. And the guidance told me that Aurea was actually chosen as a creation angel, or as an illumined light being, her spirit form, because she was so loyal, faithful to God. Like no one was at that point so loyal. No one was more loyal. So she was chosen to be a substitute or a replacement after the fall of Lucifera, because she was also most beloved child of God. Everyone is. But I'm talking about since the beginning of dawn of creation time, so the creation story and how life moved how life traveled through the multiverse. And in this universe, what happened locally after the fall of Lucifer and the great rebellion, right, against the divine. And Aurea was chosen because there's always someone that needs to fill in the spot, because in creation, everything has its function and operational wisdom to it. So back then, I didn't know why I was starting these attacks. Well, they started for me in 2019, and that was most of my guidance on Patreon, was how to deal with this Luciferian energy, and how I just knew it was her, or coming out of her, or from her, right? And so when this was happening, it made more sense to me why she was directly personally attacking me. But there's something else I need to tell you, and I've just gotten this guidance a while ago, after me and my mother already went through something very difficult that I will explain it towards the end, because I don't want to make it the point of this video, but I want to share it with all those of you who are willing to listen to the troubles we actually had to go through and are still going through. But every single time we moved from the deepest despair and survival to becoming the phoenix of the rising, or uprising of the crucifixion that was performed upon Aurea, and then her resurrection through it. And so I was actually told that, in truth, Lucifer, through her dark deeds, she fragmented herself so completely, in such totality, that from the perspective of God, right, she was difficult to locate or to find, right, in this universe. And God, in order to care for its children, she, right, it, the divine, has to know where they are, how they are, right? And we say, well, God sees everything, yes, but you also have to be aware that God in itself is just this pure power, pure love, pure wisdom. It's just this emanation of divine intelligence, this infinite, and none of us are God directly. We're all extensions of God. Like, different souls are extensions of spirit beings or illumined light beings, and then they're creating more fragments of themselves, and so on and so forth. And this is how life in creation continues. It's not a hierarchy. It's just an emanation, right? That has different tendencies and aspects to it. And so, for these beings who work under the dominion of God, who serve God all willingly, devotedly, faithfully, through their loving intent, because they stay with God since the beginning of time, they never fallen. They never took a look on the other side, right? They just had training through the darkness, but they have not themselves fallen into the darkness. That's the difference. And so these beings they're called the most loyal ones. They've gotten this sort of, it's not a title, right? But in creation, let's just say they were seen as kings and queens of these creation angel realms, right? Hence Aurea being as queen. I'll talk about that more later, because this has nothing to do with the terminology that we as humans use as queen and king, which is usually very, very distorted and based on rulership and oppression and control of the fellow people, right? And so these most loyal ones, they created their first families and affiliations and associations. So with Aurea and Aureon being these divine spirit counterparts, these illumined light beings who are of the Elohim descent, they're very feline in nature as well. They have this camaraderie. They've created these alliances with these beings, the Arcturian. They call themselves the Arcturian Alliance, the AA, right? So hence the Arcturus, not just the Arcturus as a star and many, many planets of vital life around it, but this is the light realm of what we call the Arcturus. These are very, very intelligent life forces. They're like forces of life. They're light beings. They're not physical beings. And so there's these affiliations in regards to the work we do. So in order for God to know and understand Lucifer's actions and deeds more from every single perspective she moved into as the darkest of the dark, God needed to send a sealing of himself, herself, there, right? Because that's how God works. God moves into whatever needs to be understood. God creates, and then she needs to understand its creation. And so Aurea actually has volunteered herself for several purposes. The first purpose, as I've explained before, is to pick up some of her extensions that are ready or will be ready to ascend in the near future, right? Return to their natural state of the illumined light body. Second, right, is to assist this divine plan. Well, this is actually the first, because this is the most bigger picture version of her purpose plan, her mission plan, is that Her loyalty to God through this ultimate faith is to restore back the balance between the light and the dark. Hence, she was chosen as the one who moves into the darkest spheres of life. And as she traveled through this realm, as I lived and felt with her, as her, I actually encountered, especially in these last 2 years, one of the most difficult, darkest, most fragmented human expressions or essences from greed, right? Um, Revenge, manipulation, control, sexualization of life force, all these things, very, very low. I had to experience them exactly through my human body. But through me, she moved. And as I lived and breathed, she moved through me each time. So each time I was in front of the worst situation or worst case scenario, somehow she moved her light through that and taken a jewel out of that and created something new. So that's how I was explained recently. Her work has been with Luciferia's energy. She's trying to wrap her love around it so she could lure her eventually back in or back home or back to her true original self, because Aurea, as me, as her, I can tell you, she sees her, I see her as a sister, as a primordial family. But because she's fragmented herself so much, and sometimes she can be almost like non-locale based or non-locable, no, what's the word? Non-localized, sorry. And because of that, like I said, she's difficult to detect and discover and therefore move into, work around, and understand. So because of that, Aurea herself had to, as her substitute, come and follow her through this plan, her plan on earth. So it's almost like, one being goes and wants to create the fall, the other one follows that being, right? Wraps around this love. And then instead of that sinking down in totality, she creates a next wave of liftoff. It's not a total liftoff, but these are gradual cycles of creation that, I would not understand if Aurea didn't live through me. It's all her wisdom. It's all that I talk about. It's her. It's not from my human child. My human child, my human self, Polona, I have basic tendencies and needs and likes and dislikes just like anyone else. But because I have her living within me, I have her seed, I have all her knowledge, all her wisdom, and all her power as Aurea. Hence my name being Polona Aurea, and Dawn meaning working for those who bring illumined light to the worlds of creation. Okay? Um, so that's the second part, her choosing this path and to follow Luciferia's energy to detect every single defiance against God and bring it back and show it to God. Look, this is what she's been doing. So we can actually create a final judgment, because there can be no judgment when something is hidden. The same thing happened with transgression. Remember a few videos back, I talked about divine justice and repercussions taken when an illumined light being witnesses something, and how even Jesus himself told us that yes, once you witness something and with the power of illumined being within you, you can create that instant karma. Is the judgment, but it doesn't come from you as a human. You don't get to say this person deserves this, they did that. No, you just simply report the crime, the defiance against God and delinquency in a way, right? Those beings who still deflect and they move away from source that is pure love, pure life force, pure benevolence. And so it's almost like reporting it back, and then God is in charge. You don't get to judge anyone or anything, but as a person, you choose to withdraw your energy, withdraw your light and luminosity if there is a toxicity somewhere in your life as a human as well. This is what I'm talking about. And so this second part was very difficult. The third part is what she had to go through, and me, right? Because I'm the one that suffers. The human body suffers, not Aurea necessarily, but her through me, right? Because her intelligence is in this body, so she suffers through me, with me, but in a different way. And I feel the pain, the body feels the pain. So the body signals to her, and with that, we can heal anything that's been transgressed and released into the darkness to kind of resurrect it and bring it back up. That's the third part, is her work through transgression. And that was her crucifixion in this life. God also said that the reason it had to be a woman in this life is because, even with this, what I shared with you with the womb, right? And the birthing, what they call it, this birthing process of releasing transgression codes through the body. And that's most intense pain. I cannot even tell you how much it hurts. God said it had to be a woman because the woman is the carrier of the womb, and the feminine Christ resolves it has the final say in how the body is liberated and resolved, and resolved, released back into this illumined light and the illumined body template. So before that, the body can illuminate, it can ascend because of all that's holding it in 3D locked in mode or density, right? It kind of, they were giving me these words. They gave me these words, coagulation. When they were doing kind of this work around me here, around the head, they said, well, we're noticing some differences, and it's less coagulation than before. And if you go and look up the terminology, what it means to coagulate, right? You have the blood clots or something, like things coagulate together, right? And they're saying there's less and less of that. So obviously, according to them, this electricity that's discharged through the body, that's a part of transgression and these false experiments that are very dark, they go against the very nature of life, they're kind of controlling and demanding. They're kind of stimulating the body through the darkness. And these electric discharges create anomalies in the bodies. And hence, a result of that is coagulation, which in terms creates tensions, right? There's these tensors in the body that make you feel pain. And eventually you start feeling more and more pain, which becomes more and more chronic. Very, very difficult to explain. Also, what I was told about the word I received last year was actually fibromyalgia. A lot of beings, I didn't even know what it is. I received that word last year, and I'm like, what the heck is that? I don't even know about this because I was never sick in my life. So I go check it out and I read about these symptoms. My symptoms were not exactly as such. They were probably showing me this, and they were giving me this tendency of indication that a lot of people who have fibromyalgia have some sort of energetic lock-in frequencies that are not of their own nature. They're not produced through their own bodies. They're kind of stimulations. And as you know, this whole realm and 3D matrix and this 3D prison is a stimulation in a way. So even our bodies are receiving negative stimuli, not just positive stimuli. It's kind of like we're all being worked on all the time. And this is what her work, her service, her sacrifice has been one of the most difficult sacrifices. And God has said that no one has suffered as much as this human has, and it's me. And he said to me, not even Jesus, he said, because, he was on the cross, they did that to him, but his soul left fast. He was resolved. He was liberated through God because he was just so faithful, devoted, and loyal, like one of the first ones standing in the line before God. But he said, no body suffered greatly in this world physically as Aurea's Illumined Avatar. And that's me. So that's something I wanted to share with you. And it's not coming from any place of ego. It's just simply understanding who I am, always knowing what I am. Because since I awoke into Aurea many, many years ago, it's just been escalating for me. And it's more and more of a mission, calling, and just observation of everything that I had to suffer just because I'm Aurea. It doesn't come easily. It doesn't come lightly for me. That's why I'm alone most of the time. Because if I'm not, I would hurt people, not me. But, people get used in my life. For me, like if I have a sentimental, emotional, let's say love or attachment towards someone, the dark ones might use that person against me somehow, until I become very, very neutral and immune. It's been happening with my mother the same way until we both came into a place of our life that we're okay, But even she had to realize that even she can be a channel for darkness, because any person who's not fully self-mastered on this earth plane, due to the prism nature here, or the prison, has a tendency to channel darkness. And it's not on purpose. Most of the time it's not. But because we're unaware of how the darkness functions and how manipulatively, schemingly it can get, we don't know. Okay, so that's that. The next thing I wanted to share in the beginning, but somehow the time has come now, is the experience that this person in my group has had recently. And this just totally made my life much brighter. I said, oh, one more. I was thrilled. I was simply ecstatic when I heard that this is true. It can happen. So it was all of a sudden, out of the blue. I think we had a session with the person once. Very general, nothing very, very specific. But somehow, probably she was just ready. And she was doing her inner work. And she, through her observation of me in my video, she started understanding, and she was telling me how more and more she understands of what I'm sharing. And it brought me more and more pleasure that, it's nothing to do with me or getting approved or anything like that, but that people, maybe at least one, if one is enough, then the other. And, it's like 1, 2, 3. Okay, we have 3 already. And it's always going to expand, no matter how we now perceive that as being a very, very slow slow process, right? Slowly moving. So this person shared with me that all of a sudden they awoke into illumined beings, that they had an encounter with them. And through the encounter, she witnessed who she is. She saw herself. She actually told me she moved through the prism, right? Not the illumined prism of life, but she moved through the matrix. She saw many different programs ruling over her in her life. She was very distinctively, through much discernment, was able to notice them and move through them, see how they're hijacking her essence of life and her life. And then she told me, there's this next part, she told me about Aurea. It's like she met her. She met me as in my spirit form. And she said that she was like lost for words because she saw like this golden luminescent essence with wings. It's like this angelic being. She said this being was divine, was royal. And she said, you were moving through darkness. I saw you moving through darkness with such skill and precision, with such training, with such skill. And you were just fearless and fierce, and you just knew what to do. And when she was seeing that, she actually heard Lumen Light being saying, the biggest baddest in this universe, right? Me. And I'm like crying when she said that, because they told me the same, not in those exact words. And Aurea told me years ago, but I just didn't believe it because I always related so much through my human self and all that I had to experience, how much I had to suffer and being alone and isolated for so many years, right? And one of my only true wishes in this life to be in the union with the masculine, you know, like for my human self counterpart, to experience this, to feel the seed of Aurea's love and to offer it to a masculine and receive that love back. That was always my biggest desire. And so when we had that crowning experiment, master being, Illumined Light being Lamayan came again. And my mother actually heard him not speaking to us, but this time she heard him speaking to God directly. And he was saying to God, you don't know, God, what this being has done for you. If you don't make one, she's so humble, he said. She only has one tiny little wish, one tiny wish to be loved in this way, right? Through the masculine and have that union. And if you can't fulfill that for her, for this human child that she is, that she became, that she carries so diligently, then you're not an honest God. And it didn't mean like, oh God, you're not honest, but he was just speaking with such vehemence, with such precision. It was like a plea to God. He was making a stand, and I was crying because I was so happy to see someone making a stand for me and what the difficulty that my life has been. You know, and there's not many beings that will tell you that will stand for you in this fierce feline way and fight for you, even at the throne of God, you know, and speak up for you and say, look, God, no, you do your miracle now, you do your magic. So when this person from my group was sharing with me this experience, she said that she saw me in the same way as Queen. But it wasn't the kind of queen that rules. It wasn't the queen that's kind of sitting there on the throne and being all boastful. She said, we looked at each other, and first I gave her a little bit of that telling off. You know, I do that in the person, in the physical life too, because sometimes people need it. And she said to me, I needed it. I wasn't really like this, and I needed that. But it was very loving. She said, I felt it coming from a very loving space. And after that, she said she just felt me like moving her through the space of love. And I asked her, now where's my queen? And she tells me, I actually, as Aurea, I wanted to see a reflection of the queen that is the other, becoming her royalty, her queenhood, queendom within herself as well. And I asked her, now, but where is my queen? So the moment she recognized me as the queen, I gave her a direct essence transmission, telling her, yes, but where is my queen? Signaling to her, like all Illumined Light beings always do, that whatever I am and I do, you do the same and more. It's exactly what Jesus has been saying years and years or decades or eons ago, right? And we sometimes like to repeat those words, but let me tell you, at the human level, we really still don't fully get them. We don't. Because what does it mean to be a divine equal? Like, I would see everyone as my divine equal, but they're not embodying it yet, and that's the difference. And so when I said those words to her, she was telling me, I was kind of like, yeah, where were you? I was waiting for you. I was like this, you know? She was like, oh, no. But it was almost like in that loving, kind of receptive, home welcoming way. And many, many other things she shared with me, but I won't talk about them because, of course, they were personal. But just, it was the most beautiful recognition of Aurea because I was very much down in the dumpster at that point. And when she shared that with me, it's almost like I needed to hear myself. Like I needed to feel, yes, it's who I am. Yes, I have mastery over darkness. Yes, I know how to move through it. Because, we never, in all earnesty, fully mastered the dark or the light. But what we need to know is always know who you are. And when you do, you will move through the dark easily. So that's what illumined light beings do. They don't dispel darkness, but they've learned how to navigate through it. They've learned how to move through it. It's getting chilly, so, jacket here. And because we do, we can teach, right? We can pass on to others how that can be done by any individual, It's just skill that we all can learn and are learning. Okay? So the last thing I want to share with you here today is that my mother and I actually received the message after we had these difficulties that I explained a little bit in the end. But we were in such hardship. We were devastated. We couldn't believe this is our life anymore. We were just looking at each other and saying, I can't believe this is my life now. Is this my life? Is this our life? Is it really that dark? Is it really that bad? Is this is how we're going to end up serving God and end up in the dumpster and poor and, obliterated? No, it can't end this way, right? And so we were in this energy, and I did this ceremony, and we did this invocation, and started channeling these things. And I've gotten this message through the cards, which was soul, the feminine, and God. And all of a sudden, I received a transmission that Aurea, as that first queen feminine, also a substitution replacement for Lucifera, who was once the brightest of them all. It's almost like that story. What was the story? The one, Snow White, right? Who's the fairest of them all? And the queen was the fairest, but then she's fallen because she was dark. And then there's always a replacement. There's always the next one, because that's simply the nature of God. There's always love. It's self-replicating, right? And it's almost like that feeling. It was the feeling of being asked to work for the I felt a request coming from the collective soul, the feminine part of the soul of the earth, the humanity, asking. So our toiling, in a way, has been a gift to bring to this world, to this realm, because a lot of feminines, they believe or they perceive themselves as powerful, but they're hiding behind a very rigid system or some sort of a comfortable zone or comfortably numb experience of life, staying behind, being codependent, things like that. But this was our life of artwork. Our life was mastery in its own, of moving through the dark, and that the feminine finally unlocks herself and all her potential, that she unleashes herself and liberates herself. Remember, years ago, I started talking about the liberation of life, right? The liberation of the feminine divine. And if we manage to do this through our path, through our own living life stories, we would create this powerful segment of the way. We would light up the way. We'd blaze the trail, and that's what Aurea was doing. Through me, through people who met her, through people who had an encounter with her. There's many people who come across me, but not many of them would actually meet Aurea. They look at the being sitting in front of them, but they never ask themselves who is behind the face, the body, the eyes, right? There's very, very few people who want to go deeper. And once this desire is set off, it will just keep you moving. Okay? So the really, really, really last thing I want to share with you here today, just simply as I'm being called, is we really haven't had it easy. So as you know, these last 2 years were transgression years for me. And since we actually vacated our apartment, that was last year in the end of May or in June, we became homeless, and we didn't know life will turn out like this for us because we were very innocent, naive little women who went and pursued their dreams, their path, and we ended up in a specific way that we couldn't imagine if we wanted to foresee it. No way we could imagine what life would become. We simply were naive enough to leave our home before we got our payment, our full money. We just got a little deposit that we never saw. It went to the agency. And we actually got the most corrupt agent, the real estate agent that ever is. And everyone there knows that. But we didn't, because we're meditative beings that we're always out in nature. We don't deal with these things. So that information for us came a little too late. But through our journey now, as it's sort of coming into its culmination, we have realized now, looking back, we went through every single step of the way, all our foolishness, all of our naivety. People say it's your own fault. You fell for it. You were naive. God said to us, no, you are not naive. That there's a difference here. You allowed yourself to be blindfolded so I could lead you through the darkness so you could do your work. And you've simply chosen the harder part, because that path was about serving me as God and unleashing the darkness along the way. Because I've never met more bizarre circumstances, more corrupt conditions, more distorted and corrupt people and their energies, and, really ugly nature of the humankind that has been lurking in darkness for far too long. Never before, since we left our home. We went out on a whim like a fool starting the journey, not knowing what's ahead. We didn't know we were going to end up homeless, right? We didn't know we were going to have to move 6 times before we moved the 7th time. And that even the 7th time wouldn't be, right, solid deal for us. Because the moment when we came here, right, we thought the person who sold us this house was a very honest, earnest man. And it turned out to be not the case. Because God told us recently that every single one of these people that we met, that somehow had a deal, a contract, a personal encounter with us, they were given through us, through our own graceful nature, which is God working through us as the human Christ. Because God, remember, has a threefold nature. First, God is the masculine, who is the will, the power, the emanation of God. The second, which is the feminine God, the feminine Christ as well, which is the mother, caring, nurturing, full love. So we have that illumination, pure will, pure power, the feminine, pure love, pure nurturance, pure reciprocity, and pure essence of life. Third aspect is the living Christ embodiment, which is the seed of life that goes onward to create and procreate, expand life forward. This is what the dark beings didn't want to do, and we talked about it in one of the previous galactic updates. They did not want to expand themselves as the Christ. They wanted to they wanted to hold the position of discipleship of God, become your own God self without the Christ, without the Trinity, right? So they took the Christ essence out. They took out the embodiments, the traveling through life, the movement, all of that they took out with one single thought of power and being in charge and being controlling. And that seed of that control still lives through the Luciferian agenda in any man or woman that follows those principles instead of principles of Trinity. And you well know how few people actually follow the Trinity and the nature of Christ. So that third aspect of God, the God that is the Christ. And remember, last year when we went on a journey, I couldn't speak too much throughout that summer because we were moving around and I didn't have internet. Remember that? Because of the circumstances, right? In difficult conditions. I could barely walk last summer, those of you who know, because of the transgression. I couldn't walk. I had tremendous pain and I was collapsing and things like that. A very, very difficult summer. But it wasn't a more difficult summer than this year for me. It's not over yet, even so. Let me tell you that. And I called those videos last year the Mission of the Christ, and that's where it became. Everything in my life before was actually a preparation. Everything. It was preparation for this journey, for this, let's just go, right? It was meeting yourself. I was shown it like this. First, it was the knowing of who you are, and I knew who I am, and I knew myself. My God spark is Aurea. I'm an illumined light being. I am an extension of God, and I work in total loyalty and service to God, one and only, right? The one and only Mother, Father. And me as the birth of Christ being, I am the part of that Trinity that God is and creates in completion. If you're not the Christ, the God circle, which is actually the triangle, cannot be complete. That's just how it is. That's fact, right? You should all study your creation books instead of the Bible, right? Which is not really holy, but it's been rewritten thousand times before on purpose. And so, what I was saying here is the first part of you knowing yourself is knowing yourself, right? As who you are. And for me, that was Aurea. The second part of this journey now, it wasn't an internal knowing of who I am, but it was like meeting myself as God seeing himself in his creation. And God's creation, as you know, it's not always perfect because everything that this creation became, there's also a lot of distortion because of the phenomena that we know is the rebellion against God. And it was almost like this last 2 years was like witnessing myself as God looking through every single aspect of a position. It was like God meeting its creation. And the third level will be again resurrecting back to the self. And this is again, it's been prolonged, it's been well overdue and extended for me because of the difficulties and the attacks of the dark, so that I couldn't start even the third aspect of the descended ascent back upwards, that I could start ascending Aurea back and resurrecting the life force, right? So knowing first myself as Aurea, then witnessing myself as in this distorted world, like a reflection. Okay, what happens when Aurea goes into the outside world, outside of her bubble, right? Let me tell it in simple words. The third aspect will be Aurea coming back within, with all that she's gathered from this creation bubble, and she's going to carry it within and then directly to God. And that's how we're shown this journey. And because of that, that's how illumined light beings we serve God. First, you have to remember who you are as an extension of God, and what you do, who you are, your powers. You need to use those powers, especially in the second part, which is going outside of your bubble, meeting yourself at every single layer of darkness and opposition, all the setbacks, all the destruction, the killing off of your divine human child, and still staying alive. That was the second part. And on this third resurrection part after the crucifixion, I don't know yet, because I'm just before that, and it was just so much confusion and distortion, so I couldn't get back on track. Like, I couldn't get back on track. So you can imagine my surprise. I remember my video when we moved outside of that last rented place, right? I was excited. I was thrilled. And then we ended up here. Our world collapsed yet again. Because the reason why we were so thrilled, we thought, this is it. This is over. Yeah, we've done it in the last place. And the moment we move in here, everything will finally be over for us. This difficult part of the journey. Wrong. It was exactly like that. I don't know where to start. But since we moved here, everything has almost like been shattering, like piece by piece. And it was so much darkness trying to hijack our creation. And what we came here to do, to build a safe port, a safe house again, put Aurea's avatar body, right? Me. And so what happened, I can just name a few things. You know, I'm going to try to be really brief, because if I went on to explaining or overly explaining, probably you wouldn't even believe me. But it was that dense, and it was that hard, right? Remember, I've shared with you that, you know, the house was in much worse condition than we thought. It lacked kitchen. We thought, well, first, this is the easy thing, right? We thought that's the only real problem with the house. Again, wrong. We worked in the kitchen. The worker was very corrupt. He was very, very low energy. You know, he cursed at the end. He didn't even finish the kitchen. He just laughed and said, screw you. And he just laughed. And he lives here in the village, you know, and now he's walking like this. He's very, very dark person, and everyone knows it. The second people, because the bathroom was so bad and it was such a terrible condition. Well, the previous owner, you know, he said, I'm gonna, you know, handle you the people to work there. They were his people. So naturally, because we didn't pay, he paid, because we already overly paid for this house, because what we later found out, how much he would charge the previous person who wanted to buy this house but didn't, we overpaid like big time, if you imagine, because we were naive, right? To women, everyone saw, oh yeah, let's do this to them, you know, let's do this to them, let's like rob them, let's rip them off, you know. And I did like this to this person. I look at them in the eyes, and I say, are you willing to look at me in the eyes and say there's no monkey business here? He did that. No flinching, you know, nothing. People are cruel. They're literally, they have no remorse, zero. You know, they can stab you in the back as long as they feel they save themselves. But you know what? The bigger story, they don't. Because I have to tell you what God told us. Every person who sinned against us and his chosen disciple here on earth, which is again me, through Aurea's Illumined Light Essence, he said they will pay. It's not a punishment, but karma has to be met for these beings to actually come out of the darkness and grow. And if they don't choose to, it won't be beautiful for them. Because this is something we're going to talk about in the second video, in the 8-8 gateway. So every one of those beings we met, including our buyer who started this whole, you know, fiasco, this saga, because we didn't get our money for 1 year. He was so evil that, you know, he stayed in our apartment for free. When we ended up in that basement, we had to pay rent in his tiny shithole. I'm sorry, guys, but it really was a shithole. I never lived in a crappier place than that. It was no air. It was humid, moldy everywhere. You know, ruined our stuff that stayed there. You know, like killed off a lot of our things, and mold got in them, and all. I don't want to go into that. So we thought this is it. You know, it's just like 1 month of work on the house, and we're gonna get through it. Nope. You know, then the bathroom people, like, they screwed over us for 1 month. They were promising for them to finish. First of all, they didn't finish. Someone else had to do that. We had to be really vigilant to find that person who just finishes off after someone else leaves it, because no one does that now, you know. And they were screwing us over. 1 month of lost time, telling me, yeah, we're going to do this and this, on and off. And no. And I realized it's, again, another looping, because the darkness is kind of keeping you attached to something. You're waiting and you're waiting and you're waiting and you're not moving. And it's really difficult when you have to read the energy, right? And so one of the things they did, because he actually paid them and they knew each other, he probably didn't pay them a lot of money, which he said to us, yeah, you know. So because of that, they did it very fast in 4 days, very roughly. It's disgusting. It's not properly made. They were so superficial in the way they did it. It's terrible. You know, the kind of bathroom we ended up with. That's okay. That's just a physical aspect. That I will survive. But things got worse, you know? So we finished that. And remember, we had to dig out the pipes for the new water, because the previous owner did not tell us we have to plug ourselves into the water. And it was so stressful to find someone to actually dig it out for us, because there was almost like 20 meters of, you know, driveway that no one can dig with their hands, because a lot of people just do that with their hands because it's not a lot of meterage, right? Mileage. And so they had to come with the machine for them to dig that out. And, you know, these people are also very, very, you know, you have to know that every working force here, you know, the mechanic people who are working around the roads, buildings, builders, they're all Luciferian slaves. Most people don't know that. The color orange that these machines have, that's the color. That doesn't mean anything pretty. And even the dresses, you know, the uniforms and what they're wearing. And we were very much scammed, and we had to pay many bucks for that. And it was very expensive for the plugging and then the water, and they were digging out, and they left everything it was all muddy, the whole driveway. Then we had to get them to bring in the sand. They brought it twice as much. Of course, we overpaid, but, you know, they're like, yeah, here you go. How to put that out? You know, I was alone with my injury trying to get it, you know, with hands, it didn't work. So what happened then? This guy comes along who helped this person to dig it out, right? Yeah, I'm going to help you. So he comes, he helps to dig the driveway, all that. Just as we were finished, right, at the same time we had to proof the roof, the attic, sorry, because we had animals in it, right? Great. Lots of sound in the middle of the night, in the early morning, waking you up. It was very, very stressful. And I'm like, okay, let's get these people. They're going to put some insulation, and, you know, maybe that's something else we can afford, but then we can't afford much else, right? That was the budget. These people came, and they did that all in the same day. And that person who was like, yeah, I'm going to do this for you, was very, very low energy, but he presented himself as very, very, you know, boastful person, full of respect. And, you know, my feeling is never wrong, ever in my life. And, you know, sometimes I have to go into these situations for me to learn something, which is a difficult part of learning here on Earth. But what happened is we just couldn't even get a daybreak. The roof starts leaking. And the previous owner told us, yeah, no problem. The roof will be okay, you know, for another 5 years. Yeah. Half of the roofing's missing, and they're all cracked, and, you know, moss, and the moss pulls in the water. And I didn't learn more about the earthy stuff in the last 2 months. It was devastating for me. And how fast things were going. We didn't have any time to just sit down and just rest and relax and just take a breather before the next wave came. It was like a wave and a wave and a wave and this and that. And it was just too much. And everything ended up being wrong with this place and cracked and this, and it's like a older house and the terrain is falling down and oh my goodness, and everyone had a word to say and everyone was getting very, very fearful, like scaring us. That's how the darkness works. Let's just scare these two poor old women, literally old. um and so when this happened, I actually meditated because it started leaking through the front entrance space. And we're panicking. I was panicking. I'm saying, not this, the worst thing. Roof. I was really, really devastated. I just know I was so tired. I didn't know what to do. And I was meditating and I got this guidance. And the guidance said, go to the next door neighbor. And I clearly saw it. But what happened, I later got guidance, darkness intervened. Because my guidance was ultimately correct. But that didn't play out this way. Why? Because this guy, right, the shoveling guy, the assistant guy, the nice guy, presenting himself like that, he was a rat. And rats are people who always present as very, very respectful and like this, but they're getting influences and respect from people through false kind of appeal, But they're actually very, very dirty inside, and they will play you dirty if you allow them. So this little rat, right, he came and he said, oh, no problem, me and my son will do your roof, what are they called? I keep forgetting. It's still made of cement. It's still the old roof. It's not like a tin roof or, the newer kinds. And he said, yeah, let's just replace them. And we thought, well, maybe a few, for the beginning, and then he will tell us how much this costs and this and that. But he didn't. This whole time when we were asking him, he's like, no, just bring in more, bring in more. And I had to drive these roof replacements. Like, they're like over 200 kilos in my tiny little car that's not made for that. And I had to drive all the way back and forth and, from a different place that actually had these in reserve. And the guy worked on it 3 times. He went on the roof and replacing them. And we replaced about 200 of them, I think. The roof has a lot, by the way, because it's like an alpine, like longer, extended roof. And the whole time we were asking, well, how much will it be? Oh, no problem. He didn't want to tell us, right? And the last day he also came to chop off my tree because I only had shade. I had no, not the whole tree, just the top, right? And he did other physical things because what we realized is we opened up these extensions of the roof, these places that are almost like the extensions of the attic. And they were so dirty. They had 20 years of these people's crap still in them, like their old furniture, I don't know, cement, tiles, everything in them. Like, since the dawn of Yugoslavia, that doesn't even exist anymore. I'm looking at that like, what on earth? What? This is the dirtiest house I've ever seen. And it was all like locked in and hidden. And we were devastated. We had so much work. We cleansed so much of the crap. And then there's these 2 houses, tiny, like a boiler room, or what do you call it? The furnace room with some, tools and stuff. And the shed, kind of a tool house for, I don't know, equipment, gear, bikes, I don't know, whatever. And that was so dirty. I had even these beer stuff, like cans and stuff, like 50 of them. And it's all hidden, like, and rat nests. And oh, guys, I can't tell you. I was literally browsing through shit and I could hear and feel Lucifer all the time, like laughing at me, mocking me, like, yeah, this is what you deserve, B, like not a queen, but the other word. And she's so happy when she's punishing me. The best thing I can do at that time is show her that I actually enjoying the work. I'm like, yeah, I'm enjoying it. It's physical work. I like it. It keeps me running because that's the only thing that works is my pride, not like the arrogant pride, but the pride of myself, that I can do anything, that the true queen is the one that goes and jumps into the dirt and the mud and the sand and everything. And I'm not ashamed of myself. And I'm not thinking, ugh, this is dirty. Ugh, I'm too, vain for this, or I'm too fancy for this. And it's been so much pile of shit in this house. And I couldn't believe, I was like, oh, we lived with this crap. And that guy helped us, to remove that. And this other guy comes with his tractor, like, he put all that wood. It was like a pile of wood, like literally you can burn someone at the stakes, seriously. And he took it all because it literally reeked of urine. I think it's from all the animals that went under the roof. It was disgusting. And it was just like so much shit. And then, as if that was not enough, towards the very end where the ground goes like up down to the forest and it's collapsing. They had this thing that they were just removing like wood and stuff on it. They were just throwing it all in the piles. I don't know why. Like I could never do that. Like their own personal trash place, a huge, like collecting center for the trash. And I couldn't believe it, right? So I thought, okay, we took all the wood out, and me and my mother, we had to carry it all the way to that guy's car. He just took it, but we were the ones carrying it. That was a very, very difficult day. And I remember after removing that, the next day or 2 days after, I started digging further. And I found these cement tiles for the roof, and paved roof pavings and the ground pavings for the pavement, right? What are these things called? I don't know in English. And these tiles, they're everywhere in that dirt, and I had to hand pick them out. I used all day just to get that out. And I still have to drive it, to the collecting center, and I just can't have that shit there in my property. It's like, no way, even if it's like close to the forest and it's already there. And I just couldn't believe how much work like wasted. But the moment you get something, it's yours. It's no longer their mess, it becomes yours. And it was so much work in vain, like physical work, that it wasn't like you cleaning after yourself. It's not like you picking up your own shit. But it's really symbolically how my life has been. Like cleaning, eating, swallowing the poison of others, swallowing the darkness of all these people that came across. And as that wasn't enough, the final little juicy detail today I will share with you. So what happened then? After all this, we think, oh, last break, and the guy for the roof, we bought all the material for ourselves already, so that's not included. And, the guy who was presenting himself as so, this older man and so honest and earnest. And he tells us, yeah, 1,000 euros. And we're like, what? And it threw me on my butt. And I'm like, no, what? He's like, yeah, right. You're pleased. I'm pleased. I'm like, no, I'm not pleased because we asked you several times and you didn't say it. And it's not like he has a company, right? He can give you a receipt, but it was all just happening so fast. He was like telling me, yeah, bring them more. There's more broken. Bring more. Just so he could replace them more so he can, charge us more. And I couldn't even think about it because it was all happening so fast. And it's almost like me falling under its influence and just couldn't think straight and couldn't think for myself. That's what happened. And we kept asking him, and each time, like, he looked like flat on the ground. He didn't want to say. And then we call him the next day and we say, well, we can only get you half much. And he's like, no, that will not do. You have to give me the money, And we thought, okay, let's just agree on the half, okay? And so what happened on Monday? It was morning, and suddenly my mom calls me downstairs, and the mailmaid came. And in the mail, we've gotten the tax statement we were served. When you sell a real estate, you have to fill out a form for making a profit. Like if you sell your real estate, for more money than what you originally bought it, and you live so many years in it and so on and so forth. And our agent, as bright and nice as he was, he never told us that. And actually, he confirmed to us that we will not have to pay this tax money because we actually lived in that apartment over 7 years. And that's what counts, and that's in itself pardoning of that. And what happened, he filled out a form wrongly, plus there's a whole catch here, I'll tell you. So we're being served those papers and we look, and those papers actually state that we each have to pay almost 5,000 euros each because we were half owners, right, of the place. And we're like, what? We didn't know that, but we already invested in this house and in the workings and everything. Where on earth will we get this money? And we're devastated. Guys, you cannot imagine us. I'm looking very peaceful here, and our case is still not resolved, but I'm peaceful because I know that whatever happens, God will provide. I'm not saying that I wasn't worried. We were crying, we were yelling, we were screaming, we were pleading with God, asking God, where's our fairness? Where's the divine law now? We're serving God and bringing light to all these situations and people, and never once doubting the nature of why we're here and how we're serving and how we're served. these papers bringing us to the verge of being extinct, literally, on the verge of despair and poverty. And, how will I live? How will I pay? Like, we're 1,000 meters of elevation here. And you need to pay for the gas, not the gas, but heating, right? And here we have still an older form of heating, which is very expensive here. And, winters are harsh and all these things. You need a car. My car is now broken because of I had to carry all these, actually drive all these heavy things, and I'm like stoked. I just couldn't believe what was happening. And I thought, well, that's the worst, right? And the same day, the guy comes here and he starts threatening us, right? And he starts telling us that, we just have to give him money, or he will, he's going to make sure the detectives come and this comes and they'll ruin me, that he's the kind of person that he likes me. And if I'm nice to him, he can lift me up. But if I'm lying to him, right, because I didn't give him money because I showed her the papers, like I'm saying I can. Plus, he was extortioning, he was like, you can't do that. You have to give a pre-receipt to someone. You can't just do that. You can't just tell someone like a price made out of your own head and then, extort them for the money. Like, it's a violation. And I told him that. He doesn't listen. He said, you're lying to me, so I will ruin you. I'll pull you down. Imagine this old man who first came here. Oh, I'm all about respect. I will rather, not take from you than to offend you. All these things he was saying. What a rat. And he was almost speaking in this mobster, like mafia kind of tone, like, hey, you displease me, I ruin you, I will kill you off and everything you work for. I'm like, oh. And he left then, say we have time until the end of the month to pay him. And I didn't know what to do. I said, I need to also know my rights. So next morning, I wake up with the guidance I need to call the police. And I call emergency number. They bring in the cops, and the big one comes. So first it was 2 guys, and then 2 women came. They came with a big car, and the women were actually very nice. And it's good because, I have it on record now. So if something happens and for being threatened, and, I was never, guys, threatened in my whole life. And this is just simply how the dark works. I tell you, the dark does this. It works for people who are very low. It just sends these low impulses through these scumbags. I'm sorry, but that's what these people became and made out of themselves. And the guy was telling me, you're no good. You're no good. You're not honest. I'm like, I'm not honest. What? Okay. And it was really, really difficult. You can imagine. Like I went on my knees and I said, please, we're 2 women in despair right now. Can you just at least wait until we figure out how to pay this tax, right? He's like, no, you offended me. I will ruin you. That will be the ruin of you, and everyone will come here and they're going to take your computer and your phone. And I have people connections everywhere. He was like mafia, like telling me these things. And so, of course, the next day I felt safe to call the police. And we had this discussion here in front of our house. And the women were super nice, actually, strict but nice. And they're telling us that no one can just want money from you. You can't just, because it's not how things work, and that the person should know that it's illegal if you don't have a company and give out a receipt and things like that. And he said, if we will trouble you, then it just if there's no agreement, then you can call us, and when he comes, and violation and all this, that's all on paper. But I realized after that how everything we've been doing has been setting off these triggers of the lowest impulses on earth, and then watching them play out, and God creating these punishments. Because it happened a few times. The guy who didn't finish the bathroom and kept scamming me, kept lying to me in my face that he will come, and he never did, and I knew he wouldn't. And then the last resort, he said, I have a funeral or something, and he said, I had a tragedy, I'm not going to come and do your bathroom. I'm like, I already knew that. But I realized things are happening behind the scenes, and God is not vindictive, but it's a just God. And anyone who sins, because people are sinners, not in a biblical way, but they're sinning against the nature and the law of unity and love and respect and camaraderie. And if they're willing to put your life in danger and threaten you and these things as a divine child, the one who's serving God in all your loyalty, I would not like to be that person. In that moment, I was on my knees begging for that man to leave us alone in that moment, to give us time. I was a human. I was just a human woman scared for her life and the life of my mother. But when the person left and when we did our work and ceremony, I was a divine being, knowing that everything the person said to me, like, you don't know who I am and I have these connections. You don't know if you mess up with me. Everything is reversed because that being just didn't know who I am. And what he's now going to receive as, what he was saying, he can either lift me up or ruin me. That's actually the only thing that belongs to the power of God. Only God can do that. No human. It's just temporary, and it's all just anything that's vindictive and hurtful. It will mess you up in return. We know that, the law of karma, the cause and effect. So I wouldn't want to be that person, actually. And I don't know how things will play out by the end of the month. But we did call the tax agency, the financial, agency of our republic, country, republic, yeah. And we had a talk. We explained our situation. So we filed in a report. It's just a complaint. We gathered all the facts, how we ourselves went out of the apartment and we were never told that that would actually get us in trouble because you had to stay there for the last 3 years to be pardoned of the tax, but we didn't. But they didn't have the data that our own buyer moved there for free. So we now told our story. The guidance was just tell the truth and hope for the best. We did that, keeping our fingers crossed, because if we have to pay the money, it's not gonna be nice, not gonna be pretty. So in this last moment, in this last resort, sharing this all with you, I would also like to ask you that, I never ask anyone for favors, but I do ask you for your prayers. I do ask you to keep us in mind this month because we worked very hard, like the whole day yesterday. Like in the morning, I was writing the report. I'm a very good writer. I'm very skilled in how I express myself, not just in spoken words, but also in written word. And all my life force now went to preserving my life, preserving my physical human body avatar suit. I do miss my work, but somehow, as you know, I wasn't willing. I wasn't able to do it. Not willing, but I wasn't able because this took over me like a damp, dark spot, like overpowering my whole life. And there was nothing I could do but move through it. And so we written a report. The one lady was super nice. And we did actually 3 prayers. Our first prayer was to God himself as the source of illumined light and the power of will. And we asked for God for his miracle. We told God that we did everything as 2 human beings, preserving his name, glory, victory. And now it's up to him to give us the miracle because all we want is our dignity back. After 2 years of being homeless, ruined, lied to, humiliated, tossed and turned around, and no one listened to us in our example. And even people that I loved, like people that I honestly cared for, they still wanted affection from me, but never once considered how deeply damaged my own life has been, never once gave me something in return. That's how my life looked like in the last 2 years. And so now we did our part. And in the second prayer, we prayed to the Mother for her grace, her pardoning, her compassion for all involved in the situation. It was a very long prayer. I don't remember now because all my prayers are channeled. We actually saw light beings crying. Because when I channel a prayer, it's really intense. You have to know that. It's so powerful that angels themselves are crying because it's so felt. That's how deep I am, and that's how deep Aurea is, and her mighty love. She is the most fierce being. Like the Illumined One said, the biggest badass in this universe. One of the biggest ones for sure. And the last prayer we did was the prayer to the Christ. And the essence of that prayer, the intention was that even though there's the system, and we say, well, we're giving up on the system because it's corrupt anyway. There's no point because people were telling us, it's pointless. You already got served. You cannot do this and that. You can't. And I was thinking to myself, but I'm the truth. We did nothing wrong. We were lied to by our agent and the people, and they moved us out of our apartment out of the pretense that that's something that's normal, it's ordinary. When in fact, everyone looked at us like we're idiots. Why are you moving out of your apartment? And I never told this to anyone yet. And I'm telling you now. Because above me, above stairs, lived a very violent person who threatened us too. And I once called the police, but they said, we'll file in a report. And I said, no, because I'm afraid that person then will do something to me. They'll be vengeful. That's how people are. And I know how the darkness works in my life, so I'm not going to do that for myself. So when we were offered a chance, because our agent got us a buyer that didn't even have money to pay us out, we were so excited we got a buyer so fast. He gave the deposit to the agency. We never saw it. But what happened was, the buyer didn't have the money. He asked her, us, oh, would you do me a favor? Because, he would lose his deposit money. That's the rules. We did him a favor. We said, we'll wait. He said, oh, it's just a few months. To this day, he still hasn't sold the apartment, beloveds. To this day. I heard by my friend living there in the town. And it's just been awful. And what they were doing to us, pushing us around, and we were just being tossed and turned. Like physically, we couldn't do much. I'm very skilled in spirit work, but physically things had to take their turn too, right? And if it wasn't for those few people that sometimes had a little bit of compassion for us, we wouldn't get to where we are now, And this last prayer was the faith that there is still the Christ spark in humanity. Like you have a system, law system corrupt, governmental system, everything corrupt. Yeah, most of the time, police, agencies, all that, we see now what's happening in the world. Yes, but our fortunate luck was that every time we had someone, remember in June when we moved here, the bank was giving us a hard time because I had withdrawn my PayPal money because I had to, otherwise we couldn't buy a house because our process with that apartment was so prolonged that our agent went on his vacation. He didn't even communicate with us on the phone. He couldn't care less whether we stay homeless or not. After he got paid with our money. And he didn't tell us that we have to fulfill these agreements and have to stay in our apartment until the very last moment, or we're going to pay the tax. Because you literally have to live there the last 3 years or nothing. It doesn't matter how many years you lived there before, right? You had residency there. You had your, permanent address. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter to them. You were not even informed because they're a lousy worker. They don't care. They just want your money. And we were the victim of that system, yes. But our last prayer went out to all those who still work in governmental agencies that still do have an ear to hear and the heart at the right place and are still feeling that compassion. The first call we had with the woman, the agency, for the tax, I was explaining her story, and towards the end, she was getting a little anxious, and she said, I understand, but the only thing I can do now is feel compassion for you as a woman, but I have to go home and I can't do much. Just write a complaint, share as much as you can. We got some data. We went and asked for some legal advice too, but it's not much they could do. They just said, not much we can do. That's the law. The next day, my mother calls her again, and she says, you know what? I didn't know that your own buyer went and moved there. It's not like we were, putting our apartment and, making money or profit off of it. And so she said, oh, wow, that's an important data to hear. Just gather more and gather more. And then she said to my mother, well, we're kind of being inclined to serving you and resolving this in your favor. But after I written down the whole story yesterday with great skill and precision, I don't know what's going to happen. I really don't. We might get pardoned, we might not, and we might need to pay the money. But what I'm asking for you now is to please stay with me in prayer and to pray for me and my mother to finally have the life that we deserve, to finally resurrect Aurea, because I can't if I'm constantly bombarded with physical crap. That's not even my mistake to pay. These were not my mistakes. It came out of the innocence that my inner child has to trust. I always trust people, no matter how dark they present themselves. I still trust. It's just my nature. It's how I am. And we've actually now been paying for mistakes of others. And for us to pay almost 10,000 euros, that's not like little money. Because of a mistake of others, mostly our real estate agent that everyone knows is the biggest scumbag that lives there in that region. It's all about the money. Not everyone is bad. I know some that are very nice too. But that person is very, very rotten. And I've seen them into the core of their being. They're just... And so one thing that I've learned in the way I function as Aurea, but also as a human earth child, is that I have to be very watchful, because when something is presented to me, I have to give it time. I was being too hasteful in my decisions. I thought, well, let's just follow the flow. And when the darkness comes, it wants to rush you in under the pressure of fear, like you have to do this or else. But now I'm going to be different and say, okay, I'm going to think about it. You know, there's an offering, I'm going to think about it, because I have to each time look into the precision of what's the energy coming through and behind that person and what's navigating it. Who's the driving motion behind the wheel that looks to be that human body, but it's actually the driving force for something else. In most cases, the darkness, right? Like in that case, the guidance was for me going to the next door neighbor. And I almost did, but then somehow this was intervened and that guy came. But then, like total shift, total reversal. Honest to God, I was never threatened in my life. I had stalkers, I had online harassment, I had many, many things. But that was very difficult for me to experience as a human. We were devastated that night. We couldn't sleep for 2 nights. We cried. I was like literally shutting the door, like, because when I get into my rage mode, that's when I move the energy. And the tears that my human cries are the tears that cleanse out this harsh darkness, this filth that humans have made. And so many humans live in that filth. But it will be difficult for these humans. And we will talk about the 8A gateway and the split more in the next segment, in the next video update, as well as the Illumined Union update. I'm sorry I haven't been able to finish my work on Patreon because of the circumstances I was in, but as I promised, I'll try to do as much as I can. We can never do something for, making things up. There is no such thing. There's only the now. But at least until September, I will get things in order, I hope. And I need your prayers to do so. But if any of you are feeling the call in your heart to make a heartfelt donation or energy exchange, there's a button there, donate to Serapina Light. There is a pay me button directly via PayPal app. You can do that. And that's that. At the same time, I also want to wish you good luck because I know all of us are moving through tremendous darkness at this time. This is just simply where, as a collective, we are. We've been the light first, and then we've been the light moving through the darkness. The last stage will be the light that resurrects through. And that's why the darkness is working so hard, to push us, to keep us here and stagnant and stuck. But it's not going to succeed, as you well know. And this is something we will continue in the next video update for the 8A gateway. So until then, stay tuned. Thank you for listening to this video with great care and attention to detail. Not just listening to the first part, but also listening to our story. It hasn't been easy. I actually haven't sat in my lounge chair since, I think yesterday was the first day that after weeks I just sat down and lied down a bit, just breathing and feeling into my body. And today, after weeks, was my first walk into the forest because I didn't even take walks. That's not normal for me. It's not a way to live. And honest to God, I don't want to live a kind of life that I can't even live for myself. That I'm just struggling and toiling and trying to, But that was a part of the Aurea's mission and crucifixion. But let us all be here with her, thankful for her gifts. And those of you, maybe some of you that I don't talk to, but you've had an encounter, or you've been faithful and loyal. Pray for your encounter with these light beings. And I will talk more about this in the 8A gateway update. We'll talk about the split and the timelines for ascension. And I just felt I really needed to do this first. It was a strong calling to share my story. So now I can finally leave it aside and say, thank you, you served me well. I served you, but now it's time to go. We're moving on. Full speed ahead, my beloveds. I will see you in the next update with great anticipation, care, and reflection over everything it was, and introspection and where we are, and foresight into where we're going next. I love you all. Thank you for being here, for supporting. Just please keep your prayers at this time until our case is resolved. It's not going to be easy. But again, as I've said, if you want to make a conscious energy exchange and contribution to my work, there is a donation button as well. That's the way you serve God as well. Because I have so much to share. I just haven't got around to it because I was just so bombarded by all this darkness. But there's much more I feel I still need to do before one day we move on to the next segment of the journey that is Illumined Union. Thank you again. I will see you. And as always, so much love, wisdom, and power. Take care. Bye for now.
Come into my world.